Every project manager will, from time to time, have to undergo a job interview. Some people fear them, others relish them, but the truth is, they're just part of the process. You have to understand how they work and make the best of them. So, in this video, I want to look at how you can crack your project management job interview. The secret to cracking a job interview is to really understand what it is that your interviewers want. And your interviewers want to know about 3 things. But before we look at what those 3 things are, I want to start with the one thing that they don't want. They don't want to trick you, to trap you, to catch you out. Well, okay, there may be 1 or 2 odd individuals, perhaps a few aberrant organisations where the job interview is about catching you out. And if that happens, well, roll with it and then make your decision at the end of the interview as to whether this is really the sort of person, the sort of organisation you want to work with. But the reality is that there are 3 types of interview. Let's look at those before we look at what it is your job interviewers want to find out. The first type of interview, and I would say by far the most common type of interview, is what one might call the honest questions interview. The interviewer asks honest questions and is looking for honest answers. They want to know what the answers are to the questions that are in their mind. Those questions are fair questions, and they want to see how you respond. So, when you get an honest question, stop. Clarify if you need to be sure you understand what it is that the interviewer is asking, and then mentally weigh up your options. What are the different ways you could answer the question, and which is the best way to approach it? Then proceed. And as you work through your answer, constantly evaluate the response of your interviewer to make sure that you're getting the sort of response you'd expect. If you're getting nods and appreciative ums and ahs and thank yous, then you're probably on the right track. If they're looking confused or upset or angry, you may have missed something. You may have misinterpreted their question. So stop, clarify, weigh up your options, and then proceed again in a new way. Always make your answers honest, keep them concise, and fill them with appropriate illustrations and examples to back up the assertions that you're making. The second type of question is the systematic stumper, and some interviews are made up largely of these, although often they'll combine them with the honest questions. And the systematic stumper is a question that is very hard to answer. It's one that you won't have gone into the interview with an answer to. The purpose isn't usually to find out what the answer is or how you answer the question. It's the process you take. It's how you respond to a difficult challenge, to a problem. And therefore, work your way through the problem step by step. Expose your thought processes and weigh up options that you have, demonstrating that you might see 2 different routes through and why you choose the one you do. And of course, if you get stuck, your interviewer may choose to give you some hints or prompts. Accept those gratefully and then work from those, because they will have given you those prompts for a reason. If you really think that those prompts are not helpful, then explain why. Don't just challenge them and say, why do you ask? Why do you suggest that? But explain why you think that prompt is leading you in the wrong direction, and check with them about your reasoning. Stay calm, stay respectful, and recognize that there may not even be a right answer to this question, or even an answer at all. They just want to see how you respond. The third type of question, the third type of interview really, is the power play question or the power play interview. Horrendous if you get a whole interview structured like that. But if you get a power play question where they are trying to trick you, where they are trying to assert their power over you, to see how you handle that, then my recommendation is you treat it like a stumper. Actually engage with the question as if it's a serious question. Don't challenge them on the reasoning for their asking the question, but respond to the question well. Above all, stay calm and avoid conflict. Don't engage in an argument with your interviewer. Probably the reason why they are trying to trap you or trick you or assert themselves over you is again to see how you respond. And if you rise to the bait, then you've lost it. You've lost any chance of making a choice. If, on the other hand, you stay calm, that may be actually what you need to pass the test, but as a minimum, it's what you need to assert your integrity and to go out of the interview with your head held high. And of course, if you get too many of those types of questions and it isn't clear to you that there's a good reason for them, then if you do get offered the job, you may want to consider whether this is the right gig for you. So, I promised you that there are 3 things that your interviewers are looking for, and the first one is to learn about you. They want to know about your motivation. What is it that makes you tick? What is it that you want? What is it that drives you to do a good job? And they also want to understand a little bit about your values, who you are, what's important to you, and how you make decisions. Often, projects will place people under a lot of stress, and therefore they default to their core values when making decisions, and they want to check that your core values match the kind of core values that the organisation cherishes and wants in its key senior employees. They also want to find out whether you're a person who can influence others. So they may ask you some challenging questions to see how you respond. They may push back on some of your answers to see if you can stand your ground and argue your case in a convincing and credible manner. Often, as project managers, we need to get involved in negotiations. And we certainly need to engage with our stakeholders and sometimes to influence them. So this is a crucial part of any job interview for a project manager. And the last thing that I'd highlight that they really will want to know about is something about your resilience. How do you stand up to pressure? Because projects put project managers and their teams under a lot of pressure, and they want to get evidence to understand how you'll cope with the kinds of pressures that their kind of projects will put on you. And it's no good here saying, well, I guess I would handle it this way. If you've got examples from your experience, how you did handle similar pressures, those are going to be the best things that you can give. My top tip for this part of the interview where they're trying to find out about you is to recognize that nothing says more about you than the attitude that you put on display during the interview. Go into the interview and conduct yourself throughout the interview with enthusiasm and energy. Show that through your actions that you're the kind of person that can drive a project forward and that you can maintain enthusiastic even when pushed with difficult questions. Above all, never let the attitude you put on display contradict the answers you give to questions, because those contradictions are what will catch you out. And a couple of precise tips on attitude. Firstly, people are going to judge you by the way you look. So throughout the interview, pay attention to your posture and your gestures. Going into the interview, pay attention to the clothes that you choose to wear and the way you appear. I'm not saying it's right that people judge us by appearance, but it is the reality. So think about the appearance that would be expected of a professional project manager in that kind of organisation and dress to that level or a little bit above. And finally, timekeeping is important. Firstly, get to your interview on time. And secondly, if you're asked for a short answer to a question, give a short answer to your question. Keep an eye on the time and don't make it hard for your interviewers to manage their time so that they can get answers to all of their questions. The second thing your interviewers are looking for is information that will tell them about your approach to how you handle projects. They'll be looking for where you sit on a spectrum from highly tactical to highly strategic, for example. They'll also look for your orientation towards tasks on the one hand and towards relationships on the other, and where you sit on that spectrum. Chances are they'll ask you one or two taxing questions to assess your approach to problem solving and to difficult challenges. And you might find that one member of your interview panel takes a haughty approach in order to see how you manage upwards. But without a doubt, I would expect someone to ask the question about your relationship with senior leaders within your previous organizations and within your previous roles, so that they can understand how you're going to engage with sponsors and C-suite executives, particularly if your project faces challenging times. My top tip here is that your interviewers will want to read as much information as they can about your approach to things from the way you approach the interview. So plan your interview in the way that enables you to answer questions at the right point on the spectrum between, for example, tactical and strategic, or task focus and people focus. Be aware that sometimes projects demand a different focus at a different stage in the project. So likewise, move the focus of your answer, perhaps from tactical to strategic, or vice versa, or perhaps from relationship back to task focus. They'll also try to read your approach from the way that you ask them questions towards the end of the interview when they invite questions. And of course, the final way that they can read your approach is how you approach them as individuals. At the start of the interview and at the end of the interview, you will be going through the natural relationship building courtesies and pleasantries that are right for your culture. Be good at those. Recognize that from the moment you enter the building, you are in an interview. The way you treat the receptionist. Some organizations ask the receptionists how interviewees interact with them. The way you choose to sit in the waiting room. How you interact with someone who may bring you a drink while you're waiting. And by the way, here's a tip. You may want some water, but on a cold day, if you're offered, make sure that you take a hot drink, even if you only sip from it. Because there's a simple tip, which is that we read emotional warmth from physical temperature. And if you've got a cold hand and you shake hands with a cold hand, they will see you subconsciously as a cold person. If on the other hand, you've been holding a mug of a hot drink and warmed your hand, then when you shake hands, you will come across as a warm person. An alternative, of course, is to wash your hands in hot water in the washrooms while you're waiting for your turn at the interview. The third thing that your interviewers are looking for is to learn about your knowledge and your experience. So, be prepared to give good examples of the experiences you've had and how they're relevant to this job opportunity. Be prepared to give a concise summary of what you know, your training, your learning program, and any certifications or qualifications that you hold, and memberships that are relevant to the job concerned. Usually your interviewers will have read your CV, but don't take it for granted. But also don't labour the point, because if they have read the CV, the last thing you want to do is to waste too much of their time going over the key elements. They'll also want to get an idea of your experience of organisation, planning, management and leadership. So choose some pithy examples that you can give that will give them those insights. And also, don't forget that increasingly project managers are expected to have a good sense of business acumen and understanding of the way organizations work. Make sure you've researched their organization and, of course, the organizations that you've worked in before, so that you can answer good questions. I think it was Henry Ford that said that you can't build a reputation on what you're going to do. So my last tip relating to this thing about your experience and your knowledge is make sure that you sell yourself not on what you think you can do, what you can promise to do, but what you have done. Where appropriate, take a portfolio of examples of your work, plans, documents that are going to be relevant and persuasive so that you can offer to show them. But also be aware that those documents will have come from specific contexts. Never show them anything that would be confidential. Where appropriate, you can show documents having redacted them heavily. But they will be expecting you to maintain confidentiality around the work you do for them. How can they trust you to do that if you don't maintain confidentiality around the work that you've done for previous employers? So get permission where necessary, be very selective, and redact appropriately. But if you can show a portfolio of the work that you've done, then that will be far more persuasive than the words that you can use. So those are my tips for how to crack a project management job interview. It's about good preparation and understanding what it is your interviewers really want to know about. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please do give it a thumbs up. And also, please subscribe to the channel. And to find out about videos as soon as we publish them, hit the notification bell to get your notification direct in your email. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one.